All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. We'll call the meeting to order. It is just a couple of minutes after 6 on Tuesday, October 29th, 2024. Welcome to our sneak in at the end of October Town Council meeting. We just couldn't let a fifth Tuesday go by without having a meeting. It is number 21-24. We have a pretty small agenda this evening, and there's also a particular baseball game. Mike's on. Coming up at a little bit after 8 o'clock that some of us may want to be watching. Not trying to rush the agenda. So if you need a copy of the agenda, there's some on the table over there. We have a public hearing and then just a couple of items that prompted the scheduling of this meeting, which we'll get to right away. But first, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. For the record, we will find out who's here. Councilor Pillsbury.
Present.
Councilor Fournier.
Here.
Councilor Lawrence.
Here.
Councilor Smith.
Present. And
the chair, John Egan, is here. Councilor Benoit is traveling, and we do expect Councilor Pilch. I think maybe he'll just be a few minutes late. So we don't have the usual consent agenda or other early stage agenda items this evening. We have a public hearing that we're going to open here momentarily regarding the property tax assistance ordinance. And then we've got a couple of items to deal with before we repair into an executive session sometime a little bit later this evening after we get through the agenda. Again, the agenda is on the back table if you need one. So we'll start with opening the public hearing for item number 248-24 to consider action relative to amendments to the property tax assistance ordinance. This is a public hearing. Rules for the public hearing, very few. If you'd like to testify or make comments on the particular item, please make your way to the podium. Introduce yourself when you're there. The microphone should be in pretty good shape. And we kindly ask you to try and be mindful of your length of your comments to about 3 minutes. It is a public comment, not a dialogue back and forth, so there may be a question or two from councilors, but we ask you to make your comments and then be courteous of the next person who may want to speak. So anyone wish to make comments on the amendment to the property tax assistance ordinance? This is a public hearing. Okay, I don't see any hands up. I don't think we have anybody online on Zoom. Okay, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to the council for action. Sophie, could you give us just a quick briefing, and for those in the audience who may not have been here at the last meeting when we talked about this particular item?
Sure. The property tax assistance program was actually established to start this year. We have applications available. The application period ends tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. When we started working with this ordinance, we discovered the timing was not right, because initially we had in the ordinance that we were going to accept applications in August and make decisions in September, which made it very difficult to do the calculation that we needed the tax bills this year to be able to do. So that was one issue that the ordinance committee looked at and has suggested that we use the timeline that we ultimately ended up using, which is applications due by November 1st and decisions made by the council at its first meeting in December, with payments issued after that, after all payments were received for the year for taxes. And then the other element people quickly brought to our attention that while we said you had to have no more than $500,000 worth of assets, excluding your primary residence, to qualify, the council and I had neglected to actually define what an asset was. So there are now 8 assets listed there, 8, I think, a handful. Let me go back real quick. So the assets, looking at cash on hand, I don't know if you want me to physically go through all of this, but essentially bounding it to the items that were actually considered this past year. So pension, IRA, cash on hand, recreational vehicles, cars in excess of a single primary car, and any extra other real estate that was not their primary residence.
Any questions for the manager on those clarifications and amendment to the property tax assistance ordinance? Councilor
I
Smith?
do have a question, because I did get, I had a conversation with multiple constituents about the asset question. And I'm just wondering about the secondary vehicle, whether if it's a 2-person household, there's still the second vehicle is considered the secondary vehicle.
So as proposed by the ordinance committee, yes, it would be, with the idea that this is for people over 65, most of whom would not be working, I think was the kind of the
Yep,
the
got it.
thrust.
Just wanted to clarify that.
And I just want to clarify that I think there are bigger issues that we ultimately will need to look at in the spring with this program. Some things have been brought up by some of the participants that we perhaps are not looking at to really make sure that our money is being delegated in the most appropriate ways. But we can do that in the spring. We've kind of announced what we're doing this year. Feel like we should follow it, but should use the rules. The ordinance should actually kind of resemble what we're doing.
Any other questions? All right, I'll read the be it ordained that amendments to the property tax assistance ordinance be approved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any final questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? 6-0. Okay, next up is item number 249-24 to consider action relative to the Freeport Economic Development Corporation proposal to provide certain economic development services. I'll just add, this is primarily the item that prompted the scheduling of this particular meeting. We've been having a lot of conversations with FEDC since some realignment of staff and budget adjustments late spring, April and May timeframe. And we've had a number of workshops with FEDC, and I think we've made it clear, at least I hope we've made it clear, that the council wants to continue to receive the benefits and the value from FEDC, and actually enhance its ability to continue to provide such value. That perspective has a long track record in our community, a long successful track record, and I think with our staffing positions, it is an enhancement and not a duplication. I think the economic activity of our staff person and the economic outreach and development of new resources in the community will be vitally served by the network and professional approach that the members of the FEDC board and their contract staff will bring to this town and to the issue. I think there's no doubt that a healthy downtown is something that we're all in agreement and striving for, and we're not there. We have a long way to go with creating a more vibrant downtown. That does not necessarily just mean more retail operations, although that's going to be a part of it. I think we're trying to incorporate a lot of different opportunities, and the FEDC board is well aware of, in fact, quite focused on what the particulars are in the downtown vision plan. So looking forward to being able to rely on that group to help us exercise and implement those items in the downtown vision plan. We've received a number of documents from FEDC board chair and a proposal. We had talked, this is not new, we had talked earlier in the spring and numerous times in workshops since then about an opportunity for an increment out of our TIF fund that had been funding FEDC up to this point. There's a modest amount left. The TIF is going to expire. That funding stream will be terminating relatively soon. But before then, we made a commitment to at least have a placeholder for an allocation, modest allocation, in my opinion, out of that TIF account to help FEDC pivot and transition to its new existence in collaboration with other partners in the community. So we're going to hear about that proposal very shortly, and then we'll have a chance for questions. I see many of the staff members here, which is great. And so I'll turn it over to Mary for your presentation.
It's been a while since we were in front of you, and so what I would like to do is do a little bit of a recap as to where we've come in the last months, because there has been a very large, as John said, a very large amount of conversation with a lot of groups, and I just wanted to bring you up to speed with where we are on that. We feel that this is really important work for Freeport, and we're very excited to be here. Last time we were in front of you, as John said, it was about changing resources, and it was changing resources in not only people, but also in dollars. And I think where we came at the end of this meeting, as John said, is that a really important resource was moved into the town to help do some of the things that we've all wanted to do for quite a long period of time. Very happy to have Brett there, taking some of the challenges on around codes and ordinances and planning and all those things that we have been working on for the last 5 or 6 years with FEDC. But we also heard from you all, that we value FEDC. And so we have been spending lots of time talking about it. I think you said, and with a plan, we might be able to do some funding. So we have been spending a lot of time doing that planning. So if you can forward it. I was told to never touch the mic. Is that correct? Okay. How about if I move closer to it and I'll talk louder? Okay.
You can bring it a little closer to you. It's a new mic.
It's a new mic? Okay. So I'm going to break it, is what you're telling me. Where is it? He always says, don't touch the mic, Mary. Okay. So in the last 4 months, a lot of discussion has occurred with this really dedicated board. And if you see the list of names that are here, what is fabulous about it is it's a list of individuals who are experts in their fields in the community, but they also live in Freeport, and they have been really dedicated toward that idea about Freeport success and how can we make sure that we're balancing good economic stability within Freeport so that offsets the need to always do the real estate taxes increases. So this is a board I want to say thank you to. They've spent a lot of hours doing this discussion, and they're very committed to the future success. Go ahead. But the other thing that I want to say thank you to is the list of individuals that are in the town. And again, we always say, thank you, Tawny, we are better and stronger together, and it's so true. The conversations that happened with John and Sophie and Brett and with the chamber, Maria is here. Maria Nappi is here with a chamber about how we could leverage resources in the best way, how we could provide the best services for Freeport, utilizing resources that we have. So again, I want to say thank you to all these people because there were lots and lots of time spent there. Now, where FEDC came at the end of this was a mission and vision statement that FEDC put in place, 25 years ago by a group of individuals who probably Andy, as our historian, would kind of name who they were. But it's truly about partnering in the community. It's about sustainable economic growth. And we feel like this is just as true today as it was 25 years ago. These are important attributes, because Freeport is a unique community. It's a unique town, and we want to preserve the look and feel of the town, but we still want to have the economic vibrancy of downtown. It's really important that we have that. There are business owners here that have done their business in downtown. Maria always says, if you the rising tide takes all boats up. And so we really feel like it's important for us to continue to make sure we have that unique character of a business. So what does FEDC do, and what have we done? Go one more, please. So what we have done in the past, and we plan to continue to do, is the first thing is we're about advocation. So we advocate for things that we see and feel need to be top of mind. 6 years ago, we started talking about needing a vision for downtown. And fortunately, with John and Tawny both on the council at the time, we got a lot of support in saying we need a good downtown vision. So we are advocates about, again, based upon the knowledge and background of the group that's on FEDC, but also in looking at trends that are out in the community. And in businesses, we are advocates of where to go. So that was also the housing in downtown. We knew we needed a downtown TIF, which Brett has now taken into the dog bone concept. So we are advocates of things that we see need to be done in Freeport. And we will continue to do that because we think it's important for us to be that voice. We also think that we can be a good independent voice by being industry knowledgeable. A good example of that was how many months ago, 7 or 8 months ago, Leanne Nichols, who owns Keller Williams in Portland, came to us and talked about everything that was going on in the housing market and where Freeport sat in that housing market and how housing was very, very difficult to afford. And so, again, with this group of individuals and with the businesses that we talk to, we think we have a nice way of bringing that independent voice into discussions and into the projects that we're working on. The other thing that we do is provide collaborative support. Over the last 5 years, we have worked with the town on goal setting to say what are the things that FEDC could do that perhaps the town doesn't have the resources to do at this point in time that could help everyone move forward. And we have done things like, again, the downtown vision. We did a fiscal impact analysis study that was about what housing costs, et cetera, et cetera. So there are a lot of these collaborative projects that we have done. And go ahead into the next. And we collectively have experienced and have benefited from these. Last time we were with you, we brought in this long list of the things that we've done over the last 5 years. For those of you who are here, I'm happy to give you a copy. We're very proud of them. But we've done a lot of things over the last 5 years in collaboration with the town and other resources in Freeport to help move us along on how can we be economically strong. So we have felt this. Go ahead. And the next thing is that our partnerships, Brett said this morning when we were talking, he's like, our partnerships have worked before. We've shown that they can work before, and they'll continue to work. It's through collaboration, it's through bringing ideas together, it's through learning and adjusting, particularly the learning and adjusting. And if you think about where we've come in the last 5 or 6 years, we went from retail was going down, COVID hit. There have been so many things that have happened, and so it's important for us to continue to work together with one another to say, what do we need now? And you can see that those top projects we're still working on. We have members from FEDC who are on the grant support, who are on the dog bone. We are involved in those because, again, we can take the unique experience of the FEDC and put it into those projects. So today, the project that we're talking about is business outreach. We know that this is an important time for business outreach. And talking to the chamber when we were talking about sharing resources and how we were going to go about doing this with kind of no funds or very little funding, one of the individuals on the chamber said, is this really the right time to be going out and asking people to come to Freeport? And our answer was absolutely, yes, it is time. Because now we have all the work going on within the town that we think is going to help us with some of the barriers that we've run into before. And we got to get this back on the road again. We need to be more outward facing about what's good about Freeport. Why should you want to be in Freeport? It's time to do it. So that's why we're here today. That's the business plan that we put into you. Go ahead and put. So what does business outreach actually mean? What it means is, first of all, it's amplifying the voice of Freeport. That means going to conferences, going to bringing business owners and businesses together and talking about, why it's such a great idea to be in Freeport. We do this with small businesses. Brett does it, Tawny does it. But this is more of a concerted effort to say, what's the message that we should be taking out? How can we more formally put together more like a marketing plan about why do you want to come to Freeport? We've got some great big companies here that can help us do that. We've got some great people on the board, but it's now time to amplify that and really kind of take it on the road. The second thing is attend selected conferences. We have a group of conferences that we want to attend. One of them is Maine Outdoor. One of them is Maine Retailer. I always forget the name of the one, ICSC, that is all about retail. We know it's time for us to go to those conferences and be present at it. You know, one of the things that I'm really missing now is Chip Gray, who owned Harris Deacon Inn, was amazing at this. Do you remember when we got that award that was like one of the top 10 places to go in the wintertime was Freeport, Maine, not in the Bahamas? It's because Chip, for years and years and years, went to these conferences in Boston where he talked about why Freeport was the place to go to. So now with a void in that, it takes a while to create that kind of psyche around us, but we don't have it now. And it's something that we need to get back, and we're missing Chip. I mean, I don't know if anybody ever believed we were in the top 10 places to come in the winter, but it was nice. But we're missing that. And it's also tuning up that Freeport economic marketing message and materials. You know, we have a website, we need to update that, but we also need the right messaging. And Mark, can I let you tell your little story? Sure. Can you? Come here. Come here, I'll step over for just a second, because this is an important message, this is an important story about a message, and then I'll finish. Go ahead.
I think the message you're talking about is at the FEDC meeting this morning. We were talking about marketing Freeport and what does that mean and what is our role now, and as the role of FEDC has evolved. I've been on the board for more than 20 years, and it's evolved over the years from sometimes being an advocate or a pain in the ass, frankly, to you folks because you don't want to hear something, but then and then sometimes it's really being a cheerleader and an advocate, and now. Really, with the change in staffing that Sophie has set up with Brett, I actually think it's an opportune time to get back to really sort of core economic development issues. We really have found ourselves fighting systemic issues over the years, like parking situation, where it was 6 parking spaces per 1,000. It was killing the tenants. It was killing the landlords to pay these CAM charges to pay $6 and $7 a square foot just for parking. And when that was lowered, it was cut in half. And, so some of those systemic changes that we've been fighting for have happened. Others haven't. But now, now the system is set up differently. So FEDC doesn't have to fight those fights and it can do more of what Mary's talking about. An example of that is, if you look at the numbers, I do commercial real estate, and retail at one time was my specialty for more than 10 years. And I still do a lot of retail work. But it's try to find the identity of Freeport. Freeport isn't, it isn't a main mall. It doesn't have a Target. It doesn't have a, Walmart and Sears. It doesn't, it doesn't have an ocean. It doesn't have an ocean front. So what brings people to Freeport? What's the unique thing? Well, it happens to be a visitor place, right? So, how does that play out? So, in trying to fill some of the spaces in Freeport, I've run numbers by this group called Placer. The numbers in Freeport aren't really that impressive. Really, there are not a lot of visitors to Freeport. So you've got to find something unique. And one of my clients is Chilton Furniture, and they, as most of you know, they have a spot on Lower Main Street. And we were talking recently about some changes that some things that they're doing to their business strategically, and they have gone from an unfinished furniture business to a real high-end furniture company, much like Thomas Mosier. They have a lot of the same designers of Thomas Mosier, in fact, for some of their former designers. And so as they start to identify their audience, they realized that they really needed a place to showcase some of their goods a few years ago. So we opened up a spot in downtown Portland in the Old Port because they wanted to take advantage of that, that customer coming in, from away. And in the meantime, they have a very strong, robust retail business, kind of a local business that has come out of, their Freeport store and their Scarborough store. And their customer, they're finding more and more, is from away. Like 60 to 70% of their customers is from, large metropolitan areas. And so strategically, they're trying to decide, well, what do? We don't really need 2 furniture stores that are functioning in that way. We need more of that showroom. And so Scarborough was their, top performer, or is their top performer. So the natural tendency would be to close Freeport. But as they identified their customer and looked at the unique features of Freeport, they came to the conclusion, no. We think that we would be better off closing Scarborough, our higher volume store, and staying in Freeport, because the customer from Freeport isn't coming from 3 miles or 5 mile radius. The customer from Freeport is coming from a 100-mile radius, a 200-mile radius, and, from Washington, D.C., from Charlotte, from Georgia, from New York, from Philadelphia. And that's what the stats show. When you look at these placer reports, it shows it's coming from a wide range. So here's a high-end, retailer that's trying to reposition themselves, and they're actually advocating for their lower volume store because of the outreach and the sales that it drives to their online sales and their catalog sales and so forth. So, that's a unique story, I think, to Freeport. Not a lot of other towns can say that. So, we can't win on sheer numbers, so we've got to find other niches like that. And, that's the sort of work that we're doing on FEDC, and I think that's a good example of it. And it's really, I'm looking forward to seeing the board get back to economic development in the true sense. And sure, advocating still for things like, that need to be advocated for in the town. But that type of outreach is what I look forward to. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, no, it's fine. That's just that good example of tuning up Freeport economic marketing materials. It's what's the right kind of message to be getting out. When Principal was with us, they very clearly said a really good town has 1/3 local, 1/3 regional, and 1/3 national. And it's also who do we want? Who do we want as nationals? Who do we want as regionals? And what's the right message for them? So that's what I mean by tuning up the marketing materials. We don't want just anybody here. We want the right people here. And so this gives us the time to be able to do it. Go ahead and go. So as far as what are the outreach deliverables, so the board is a little bit worried because when we look at the vacancies in downtown, some of those vacancies have been open for 10 years. And if you think we're going to wave our little magic wand and they're all going to be filled in the 5 months that we're doing this or 6 months, that might be a bit of a stretch goal. So we just want to make it really clear that what we're doing is we're initiating a marketing plan to do really primary things first off or the second two, business feedback and perception. What are we hearing from people when we go out into the marketplace? What do they want to see? What do they want to be able to come here, and how do we get them here? So it's informing Freeport to the strengths and barriers that we have, and how can we look at, ways to be able to get around that. It's also reporting on touch points. Who are we talking to? Who are we seeing? How many people are we going to? What are we hearing at the conferences? So yes, we want to fill vacancies. We absolutely want to fill vacancies. That's why we're doing this. But I think in this first period of time, I think we're going to do a lot of learning and adjusting about what the marketplace is like out there. So that's the business outreach deliverables. So what we're looking for is a TIF allocation. Honestly, we just can't do this without a TIF allocation because this requires, and we also believe this is a Freeport investment. This is not something the FEDC is doing just for the grins and giggles. It's because we hope to increase the economic base of downtown. We hope to increase real estate taxes, that are coming in from the businesses downtown, and to keep the downtown vitalized because we know that that's really important. With this funds, they would support 8 months of contract labor. We've decided to use contract labor, not to hire someone because it's a short period of time. We've also decided to collaborate with the chamber, with Tawny, because it's a local person who knows the place, who already, and if you've ever heard Tawny talk about Freeport, holy cow, it would be hard not to move here. Hard not to stay here. She knows it really well. There's some adjacencies with the chamber that we've talked about with Maria and Catherine about how do we make these adjacencies work between the chamber and what we're trying to do. But the funds would support that contract labor, also cost of marketing materials, social media, conference attendance, which is not inexpensive. The total cost for our budget for the year is higher than the $60,000, and FEDC would come up with a balance of it through some of the reserves that we have. So that's where we are. What questions do you have?
Thanks, Mary. I just want to reiterate that the presentation that we just heard is exactly what we asked FEDC to come to us with. We took a advisory vote, so to speak, on holding a place in the final TIF allocation. We moved it in the 2025 budget for an eventual decision that we're in front of tonight. So I just want to put that in the context of it's taken a while to get here, but we have been giving the clear direction about the town's desire and I think increased value of having FEDC continue. We made staff decisions that required them to pivot and reimagine how they're going to be structured, and they've now successfully demonstrated how they're going to do that. And the TIF allocation is a bridge allocation of funds for them to move to a different model of how they do business. And I'm pleased to see that they've found a way to collaborate locally with the chamber. Perfect alignment there. And so we can have a discussion. I just want to point out that we asked FEDC for a presentation, how they're going to do it, what's their budget going to be, what's their focus going to be, how are they going to be additive and enhancing and not duplicative. And I think we just heard exactly what that is. So I just want to put that in the context of we asked and they delivered it. Matt.
I think it's great. Thanks for taking the time to walk through that. I'd love to see some more detail around it. Specifically, this is an investment that we're making for this period of time, but I also want to be mindful of the long-term impact. And I don't just want to fund something that's just going to stop and then we're just going to stall ourselves out. So I'd love to see some more detail around the town's contribution, the full sort of year budget as it's broken out between contract labor, marketing materials, conference attendance, travel, things like that, just so we can kind of see where it's headed and then start the conversation, because we're being very reactive here. Start the conversation if it's going to be what year 2 looks like and possibly beyond, because this is such an important thing for our town. I don't want to be short-sighted, but at the same time, I appreciate the high-level view, but I'd really love to see some more detail around it. And I think one of the really important things that we're going to want to talk about is, you mentioned it in goal setting and sort of the metrics. Now we're going to have a few players in the sort of arena, and I think it would be beneficial for us to have a real clear idea as to who's doing what the goal is for the period of time, and how we can kind of all work in coordination and not duplicate efforts, because it's going to be challenging not to kind of trip over ourselves, especially as we kind of get up and going. And that would just give me a little bit more of a sense of direction and a sort of peace of mind around the investment we're making and sort of what the return's going to be.
Matt, I'll just add that Mary and the crew had that exact detail in the budget, and I suggested that we get to the discussion of actually taking the vote to support the organization first and not get tied up in how much is a website going to cost and what are we spending on marketing materials this month or that month. I think that's their responsibility as an organization that's running. I don't disagree that we want to see that. It's all available, and we can supply that. But I was encouraging them to keep the focus on why this allocation from the TIF is going to support something that we want to see continuing. So that's why you don't have it. It's because I suggested that we not have it on the table tonight to not get bogged down in those $5,000 details about who's spending on what on the website. Darrell.
I think this is a wonderful plan, but there's one thing that's not addressed here. We have a terrible black eye on doing business in this town.
We do.
We took steps back almost 8 or 10 years. People don't like to admit it, but that's where we're at, folks.
It is.
So, if I was king, I would say, let FEDC run wild and go out and get us back to where we need to be. Don't hinder them. Don't hold back. This really has to be, in my opinion, an all-out approach by FEDC, the chamber, doing business in Freeport, because we paint ourselves in a terrible, black, dark corner, and I hope we can pull it out. And I fully support this, and I'm not sure if it's enough. I think that's a heck of a deal for that amount of money coming out of the TIF.
Yeah, well.
Yep. The other thing I'd like to see is how do you know we've succeeded? Not just, oh, here's the goal, but here's what we know that we have succeeded in this. The other thing that concerns us is along the same lines you said. We paint ourselves in a corner and we're trying to get our way out of it, but we haven't moved anywhere. As far as I see as a town with our zoning ordinances or anything like that, I know we're looking into them, but it can be, oh yeah, come to town, we're doing this, and then 4 years later, we haven't changed anything, and we've spent all this time doing marketing, and yeah, it's a great place to do business.
We have to do both.
It's great, you say that, but show me.
Yeah.
That's where I think we need to work
Right.
harder and quicker on getting through those roadblocks, because they've been there as long as I've been on the council.
Right.
I would agree, Chip, and I'm hoping that, I completely agree with that, and I'm hoping that in the coming year, the council actually is ready to hear, because I'm pretty sure FEDC has some very specific recommendations and elements of how to get at the issue that you and
do.
Darrell are talking about,
They do.
to bring more development to the community. Eric?
I just want to reiterate what Matt said in terms of budget, because I did think we were going to get that, because it said in this proposal that the detailed financial allocations were going to be available at the meeting. So I was expecting to see that. The other thing, just going back to the conversation in June, and we talked about how the TIF funding was going to need to change because of the transition of the TIF. And what it would mean for FEDC to transition to the possibility of having other resources beyond the town. And so what I was hoping also to be part of this transitional piece was, what is the outreach going to be, or what is the thinking around how FEDC goes forward from here? Because I think town funding is still going to be essential. But I also think that, part of what we were reacting to as a council is the idea that it was only the TIF that was funding FEDC rather than being a more diversified funding model. And I understand this isn't the whole budget, but it sounds like you're just pulling from reserves. And I just wonder if there have been conversations already within the board.
I can certainly answer that. The board is very clear. We do not want to be a fundraising body. We do not want to compete with Visit Freeport. We do not want to compete with the Chamber. We think that that is the wrong thing to do, because those two organizations are also incredibly important to the town, and they do amazing things. The Chamber is the business support and the educator. Visit Freeport is the one that brings everybody here. You see it all in the Fall Festival and all that, and they rely on businesses to pay them for it. So FEDC has clearly said we do not want to go knocking on people's doors. I think this is my opinion, is that if in fact we prove that we can fill vacancies and that in fact the boat rises in downtown and we have more vibrancy, that means your taxes are higher, you're getting more income, it's coming in. This is a town issue. It's a town concern. My opinion, and I think my board's opinion, is between the town and FEDC, we got to figure out how to do it. Perhaps the town is in a different situation in a couple of years and they have more capacity to be able to do this sort of thing. So maybe this is like a short-term fix that FEDC can bring here. But we believe this is for the town. Now, there are businesses that are going to help us in, like we've already had business say to us, if you want to go to that big conference, we already go there, we'll take you around, we'll help you find people, we'll help show you around. We have a lot of businesses who want to help us in this. Maria's here. There are other businesses that are standing behind us say, let's get that marketing out. But to go to them and ask them to pay for FEDC, I don't think that's what my board wants to do. So to your point of future funding, I think we're sort of all stepping into this saying we're going to do the best we can in the next 8 months, and then we're going to see. We're just going to play it by ear. Yeah. Sometimes you don't have all the answers when you step into something.
Dan?
Yeah, could you talk more about the collaboration between FEDC and the Chamber? How do you know who does what
Sure.
this year, next year, and
Sure.
how the funds get split and all that?
Sure. We have met, let me see, Maria, the Chamber Board, I met with the Chamber Board met again. You can probably talk about this better than I can. And we've talked with Tawny, and there's a gal named Ray who is like a marketing assistant who does the marketing. So we're dividing in that. We're not trying to blend the organizations because we're not ready to do that. That's a big deal. But what we're trying to do is share resources more than just blending them together. Now, an interesting factoid is that FEDC actually initiated the Chamber Start in Freeport, which is hilarious, but they did. But we don't think they should be blended at this point. We're just trying to say there's so many adjacencies in the kinds of things that we do. So what Tawny has allocated for a certain amount of hours to the chamber and will be for a certain amount of hours to us, and how we're doing that time management. And, I will tell you, I think we're going to learn a lot in this period of time. To tell you we have it all figured out, we don't have every piece and part figured out because we didn't know if we were going to be funded. So I think we're going to find and learn a lot as we go along. The wonderful news is that the chamber and the businesses that are on the board at the chamber were incredibly supportive of this and kind of stood up and said, let's go, really early on in the game. So
I agree with so much of what you said tonight. I think the right answer is to figure it out as we go along. It is an important question because I know it's a question I get a lot, I'm sure you get a lot as well. What's the difference between FEDC and the Chamber and Visit Freeport? And I have some of the answers, but I think we're still figuring it out.
Right.
So that'll be important. On the funding side, I know you know this, but the budget is something we start talking about pretty early in the year. So even though the funding's for 8 months, it would be helpful for you to come back sooner than the 8 months to say indications are this and that, and indications are this is the size of the ask for next year.
Dan, can I say something about, because one of the things that we also think is really important, and I'm missing seeing you all, is during the Downtown Vision, we were in front of you literally every 2 weeks. We were here talking about what was going on, and I think what that did, both for the community, for the council, for the town, is it kept everybody up to date with where we were, and we haven't been doing that. So what we want to do in this is, I don't want to go away and come back in 5 months and have you say, what the heck have you been doing? I would rather be here and say, this is what happened, this is what we're learning, this is what we're finding, so that we can, if we need to reallocate resources, if we need to pull in businesses or folks from the community to help us get the best run we can. So thank you. I'm sorry.
I'm glad you said that because I wanted to point that out too, that I miss that collaborative spirit. I miss seeing you at the podium every couple of weeks and working with you.
You
to
miss
do
my
that stuff.
PowerPoint presentations.
There's a lot of people up here who would love to collaborate more with
Absolutely.
all the people down there. So I
Absolutely.
look forward to that. Last question I have is just in the spirit of transparency. There's $80,000 or so in reserves in the FEDC budget.
Yep.
So does the 60 get added to that? And is the budget for the next 8 months basically $140,000 budget, more or less? In big
No, the budget for the next year, and because we're trying to be very conservative. We're saying that we know this is a big chunk for us to take, especially because, again, with Tawny, we're going to have 10 or 15 hours a week. So this is not like we have a full-time staff to be able to do it. So the budget for the year was just under $70,000, so it would be your 60 plus about 10 from us, because the other thing we thought about is if we have that monies and we run over for some reason on conferences or whatever, if we say, wow, we went to one conference that was in New York, the ICSC, did I get it right this time? Okay. Those are very big retail conferences that you have to go to all the time to get your name there. If we decide we want to go to the other one, then we would have the funds to be able to do it. So that gives us some flexibility in how we're thinking about supporting it as well.
So why ask for 60? Why not 50 or 40 or 70?
Because the funds that we have now is the end of it. We're not going to go out and do fundraising, and so we would like to be able to have that money. Much of it was put in there by the founders. You know that. They founded this 20 years ago and put in their own money, so we're also being kind of respectful to that. So.
I actually believe it was the council that came up with a suggested placeholder number, not FEDC.
60 came from us?
Yeah.
Yes. I think it started at 70 or 75, and now it's at 60, right?
So I just want to point out, too, that we're talking about continuing a relationship here, not starting one, and that FEDC has a 20-year track record of doing things successfully for the town. So we know what they're capable of. We know what this group is connected to, and the things that they can move to make things happen and show up here in our town and to benefit the downtown. So I just encourage you to think about that while there's still some sort of softness in some of the steps we're going to be taking here over the next 8 months. It's with a trusted partner and somebody that we've done a lot of work with.
We're also kind of sassy. I mean, we'll tell you what we think, because we think that's really important too. We want to be honest about where we are. John, thank you so much, but we want to be good partners and be open, collaborative partners.
I have a question that isn't necessarily for Mary. It's really more about the TIF itself and because I know part of where we started with all of this, again, was the transition of the TIF. So given what is available, what does this, if we take the 60 and allocate it to FEDC, what does that do with the remainder of what's available, specifically as it relates to possibly transitioning this TIF to be funding the transit-oriented development district?
So Brett, do you want to speak to that while I start?
Sure.
While you walk? Okay. So you're right. The TIF that we're in right now is getting ready to expire. We are as we talked about when we put the budget for this together, we have about $100 and something thousand left in unallocated reserves after you encumber this current budget. However, and for the next 2 years, we would expect modest increases, but then we have a year that we don't have a CEA, and we would expect to bring some money in. That said, we had talked with the council about looking to take advantage of the new legislation that would allow us to renew this statutorily ending TIF one last time for 20 years as a transit-oriented development tax increment financing district. When you do that, you give up a lot of the flexibility that you have within TIFs. We would have to work through what would be allowed. We do know that general economic development, which everybody puts into their TIFs, is severely limited in a transit-oriented development TIF. It's really designed to be making development happen. So when you look at the current TIF district, it includes some property outside of the village that contributes to the TIF. And we don't know that we would be able to re-up that element of it, so it could be as much as half what it is now. But we really want to try, because this has an increment that has dollars available to be able to do projects now. And when you look at that, we would be limited to 25% of the capture being used for general economic development, which pegs it just about the current economic development budget plus a little bit, not much, a couple tens of thousands. So it is a little bit, it's different, which is why kind of we flag this for folks.
That's about all.
I just want to make sure I got it right.
You got it right. No, honestly, there really isn't much to add. That's a great summary of kind of where we're at. You know, the destination TIF that funds economic development also traditionally has funded sidewalk construction, the street sweeping equipment. So it's really about, you know, staff, and then also making sure that we have an inviting environment that we create downtown with the infrastructure. So, you know, I put a memo together just kind of mapping out some of the conversations we've had about this transit-oriented development TIF, and Sophie just summarized it almost verbatim. So that's a good place to start.
Just,
Can you remind us of the time frame that you have in mind for the dog bone TIF?
I think we need to get started on it fairly soon. I mean, I think we're talking about a 2 or 3 year window here when the expiration happens. And there's some work to do. Some next steps, we have our next meeting in a few weeks, and we'll do some GIS mapping to overlay the parcels in the current districts and what that looks like relative to the eligible TOD geography. The real power with the TOD extension on these existing TIFs is that you start with the original assessed value, 30 years ago. So you start on day one with the current revenues that are flowing into these TIF buckets continuing to flow, and then the town would have options, around the current CEAs and what those look like, and some of the resources do go to credit enhancement agreements that would expire, and therefore those resources could come into play in different forms and shapes. So it's, from a cash flow standpoint, it's pretty compelling. From a flexibility standpoint, as Sophie laid out, it is a little bit more constrained. So it would require some additional strategizing around how to get there.
But just in terms of what we are expecting to do with the TIF in its current form, there is sufficient funding for us to do this plus whatever we are going to do.
Yes, when the council adopted the budget, we encumbered the $60,000.
Thanks.
So again, this is a modest step, and I think the details that Matt, that you and Dan called out are already available and can be shared. And again, the reason why they're not in this presentation is on my suggestion to sort of keep it at the purpose and the mission of why we're doing this and not get tied up in the small details of the budget, not to be hiding that or to say that's insignificant, but I can confirm with you that that board has thought about that and has really nailed down what they're going to do with it. So that's available, and I think we could probably get that in 10 minutes if we weren't sitting up here behind microphones. If we don't have any more questions, I guess I'd like to entertain a motion that we go ahead and make the $60,000 allocation out of the current TIF as per presentation from the FEDC. Oh, did we already read that? Sorry?
You read it.
I read it. Look at that. I didn't even remember that I read it. That was like, well, that's 40 minutes ago, Chip.
So you're amending.
Short-term memory is
it,
the one
yeah.
used to be.
Yeah,
I thought I did the tax one.
yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So we'll take a motion, Chip.
Okay.
249-24.
Be it ordered that the FDDC's proposal to provide certain economic development services be approved.
I'll second that. All right. Last questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, 6-0. Thank you very much for that presentation. Look forward to working with you. Look forward to continuing to work with you. All right, moving right along, the next item on our agenda is related to some ARPA funds that are left over. We have a ticking clock on when we can use those. This is item number -250-24, to consider action relative to allocating remaining available American Rescue Act funds. Let's get the motion on the floor, just so we know we read it. Councilor Fournier, could you please read it? Be it ordered?
Be it ordered that the remaining available American Rescue Act funds be allocated.
Second.
Moved and seconded. So we had quite a bit of conversation at our October 15th meeting on this, and we have a presentation?
Summary?
A summary, I would say, and a request, I think. Right up until 5:30, Joanna, Councilor Benoit, thought she was going to be here and had a family emergency and needed to leave. And this has been kind of her project. So, and I know she has very strong feelings. We were sent away to kind of pare down our list of potential projects. And what people seem to all agree on is that we should do something with trails. And that really fell into 3 different buckets. And potentially something with the public safety fitness room, and then potentially something with the tool lending shed, were the 3 at the end of the evening that kind of fell out.
Yep, that's my recollection as well.
So, and there was some talk about the increased tax rebates. We have put an inquiry out to MMA Legal. I don't exactly understand their position, so I need more time to dig into that. So it's there with the question mark, because it would just need more time to figure that one out. When it comes to trail maintenance, we had the Conservation Commission's trail project for $9,000 that we thought had been in the budget, but really hadn't been in the budget, needs to be in the budget. So that's on the list. I asked folks about the $7,000 remaining for the agreement that we have with Freeport Conservation Trust to do the assessment. And then the only way that I thought we could really address trails the way we want to is for the town, meaning staff and the council, the Freeport Conservation Commission and the Freeport Conservation Trust, the Land Trust, there we go, to all work together, because the Land Trust is where we're getting a lot of our expertise and assistance and connection. So talking with Carrie Kinney, who is here, I think hoping not to have to speak, but willing to, is we think if we set $50,000 aside from ARPA, we can take the inventory next step. So we're going to get a nice report with the inventory of all of the town trails, and some of the land trust trails are where we kind of share signage, accessibility, what needs to happen to make it passable. They've got a lot of information there. From that, we'll be able to pull priority for actual work to happen, whether it be we would contract with, but our commission and the land trust would work together. We would have the land trust holding the money for that so that we can expend it over the next couple of years.
That was going to be my question.
Yep. And then, as part of this, just so you know where my mind is at, you don't have to agree with it, but where my mind is at, is in our regular operating budget, I really think we need to be allocating money annually towards a collaborative partnership between the land trust and the town to help with maintenance, landowner relations, easements, the kind of the kit and caboodle. Carrie won't ever say it publicly, but I'm going to say that we get an awful lot without paying for anything from the land trust. And I think a partnership is in order there. But this would at least get that first swipe of some much-needed trail work done. Existing trails, not necessarily building new trails at this point.
Can we find a place for that in the capital budget?
Yeah, I'm hoping.
Great. Questions for the manager? Eric?
So I do think, just to reiterate what you were just saying about what we get and the value we get out of the trails, coming off of our conversation about economic development, I think a lot of what we've been talking about, not only through Downtown Vision, but in other places, is how much we can leverage trails in particular and our other conservation resources toward economic development as we diversify away from just retail in our downtown. My question on the page that you just presented is option A has slightly less for the fitness room, and I'm wondering if you figured out where the rest of that would come from.
So at your next council meeting, it will reflect a Christmas present
Bonus?
made from a community member to the Freeport Fire Department, which really means to the town, for a donated purpose. And when we look at that donated purpose, to pull some of that off, I think makes perfect sense. And we might be able to, even like in option B, push that down if you wanted to try to increase tax rebates more. But again, I would want to have more conversation before I had you vote on that.
That was going to be my next question, is if we could just sort of carry that across, or to take, on option B, maybe take it down to 26 and boost the tax rebate to 15. But my other question is about the tax rebates. Knowing that we still have a question about whether ARPA funds can be used for tax rebates, if it is determined that we can, with what you know so far about the status of applications, are we looking like we're pushing the limit of what we've already allocated? Or is that hard to determine at this point?
It's hard to determine at this point because I'm still collecting them and I haven't sat down to put them into a spreadsheet yet.
Daryl?
I would guess if we're not there, we're pretty close to there.
I support the trails. I personally don't support the lending shed. So if they're going to be bundled together, I don't like that. I'd rather have a up or down vote on the trails, an up or down vote on the fitness equipment, and an up and down vote on the training shed, personally. So if they're going to stay bundled together, even though I support the majority of them, I'll have to vote no, because I don't think that's, unless we move with option B.
Option B.
Option B.
Yep.
So, one option that we have is to understand that there's more information to be had. I don't think that the trails are playing in on your, let's take money away from trails to put that someplace else. We could get the trails dealt with tonight and bring the other two back at your regular meeting in December. We still have time. We still have time. I promise we still have time. Or you could
Yeah.
make the decision and
Anyway, let's hear from other voices. Matt?
I mean, I think if we can knock some things off in agreement, I think we should move on that, especially things that are more complex to get set up, to make sure that we encumber and spend the funds in the timeline needed. I'm uncomfortable having a final discussion without Joanna. I mean, she led this. It would be great for her to be able to weigh in as well. But I think that, I see the trails being something I would support. The fitness room, I would support that as well, with the caveat that I would want some sort of, I would want leadership to present us with a plan as to how it's going to be used and built into their schedule, because I just don't want to collect dust. But I think that's an incredibly important thing for those folks to have and to be fit for duty, if that's the expectation that we're setting, and it clearly is. I just don't want it to just look nice.
And collect dust.
in my house, we call that a clothes hanger.
Dan?
I'm all in favor of option A. I think the tool lending shed is important. We've been talking about that for 2 years. There's been a lot of, I don't want to say unanimous consensus, but consensus that it's a good program. I'd love to do it. I'd love to stop making Bob and Mason show up at all these meetings and waiting until the end of the meeting to decide that we're just going to punt it down another meeting. So I'm all in favor of that. The public safety fitness room, love it. Curious about why it's $25,000 and not 15 or 30. Sounds like a lot of gym equipment. I'm sure it's all fine. I'm sure if you're comfortable with it, I'm okay with that, but it'd be nice to see what we're spending that on. And I agree with Matt that not only would it be great to see a plan for how it bakes into the public safety program, but also would it be open to town employees? Is that a benefit we can offer as part of your employment with the town? You get access to this on an as available basis, of course. I don't know that people would flock to use it, but it would be nice to offer it. And yeah, that's all I got.
So I got a couple answers for you, and an answer to a question from Daryl from a while ago. The answer to why it's 28 is because we went out and got a budget for it. And the reason it's 28, which may seem high, there is some work that needs to be done in the room to the floor and to stuff like that. But we didn't, not a lot, because my hope is that we're going to have a different space for it. So part of my my request is that anything that goes in can come back out without issue. We're talking about some pretty highly specific pieces of equipment. For example, we want, I think they call it a Jacob's ladder that simulates going up and down ladders. We want an actual stepper that stimulates going up and down stairs a little bit better. There are some stretching equipment. This is commercial grade equipment. And so that's why it's a little bit more expensive. The question about can it be offered for the entire staff? Absolutely, that would be part of the plan. And currently, we have been working towards and just got fitness for duty and physical fitness in both of the public safety labor contracts. So we would be expanding upon that, building, not just use it if you want, because, yeah, I get the dust piece. It needs to be expected.
So I have a suggestion that we might, in efforts of moving something tonight to get as much done that we can have an agreement, if we had an option C that carried $50,000 for trail maintenance, $25,000 for the public safety fitness equipment, $9,000 for the MCC trail project, $7,000 for the FCT agreement with the land trust, that's $91,000. I think we probably, at least from what I'm reading, we could all agree on. And that the remaining two items of the tool shed and potential increase in rebates could be after we get a little bit more clarity on whether or not the rebates are even allowable with ARPA money. That would allow Darrell to vote in favor of public safety equipment and the trails, two things that you've said you've wanted to vote for.
I could go with that, and I agree with that, and I do really want to concentrate on the tax rebates. The issue I have with the tool lending shed is, we brought up before, who pays for broken equipment? When batteries run out, we have to buy new ones, who's buying those? And what happens with broken equipment? Who replaces that? Is that a town thing, or is that, because we're lending to people that probably can't afford it, that's why they're borrowing it, right?
So I would say if we're buying it and we're standing it up, it's our program, and we would take on the maintenance costs moving forward.
Batteries are a couple $100, and if we decide that we don't want to replace a piece of equipment, we always have that option to say, yeah, this thing breaks all the time, we don't want to keep buying new ones.
This is another hidden cost that's going to have an impact on the budget. I'm not going to be here, but I'll probably be out in the audience coming in and say, I told you so. Sometimes we have to say no. This is an opportunity.
And it wasn't brought to us that way. It was brought to us that we wouldn't have to repair. It was suggested that we wouldn't be picking up those costs, but.
Could we vote on the $91,000 and then vote on?
Any interest in option C?
Yes.
Yeah, we can start with that.
So option C, just to reiterate for the record, $50,000 for trails maintenance agreement, $25,000 for public safety fitness equipment, $9,000 for the MCC trail project, $7,000 for the land trust agreement collaboration with FCT, for a total of $91,000.
Is that the motion? I'll second
That's the motion.
I'll second that.
Okay. I don't see any hands. All those in favor?
All right.
All right, 6-0. No opposed. So at least we got 91 done.
Okay.
Can I make another motion?
Sure.
Might not get unanimous support, but I feel like in the interest of not kicking the can down another meeting and have the same result at that meeting, I would move that we allocate $16,000 from remaining ARPA funds for a tool lending shed to be administered by the town with the help of Freeport Can.
Second?
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Hang on, I think Eric has a question.
Because I am struggling with this because I would like the answer about whether the tax rebates are even an option or not. And I feel like we don't have that information. And I do share the concern about what is the long-term prospect of this program, because it does seem to me like this is an appropriate nonprofit activity, but I don't know that it fits well within the town as an ongoing expense for this. I guess that's my concern. And, Dan, to your point, when we talk about doing things with ARPA that we wouldn't otherwise do, this sounds like it's something that it is in some ways locking us into otherwise doing. I mean, it's the upfront cost, it's the startup cost, But then it is the question of what is the ongoing. And we've already sort of signed up for the fact that it's minimal in terms of facility use and staff, but what is the long-term prospect? Because this isn't, I think the equipment that you all have described in the budget that we got was for kind of everyday household grade, not professional grade equipment that is designed to stand up to being transported all over the place and used on a heavy rotation basis. So I guess that's my concern is this, and I know it's come up a number of times, but it's the one-off, okay, we have this equipment, but then what? So that's what I would like to know what the plan is for that, and I think we've heard the manager's answer to that. And I do think that would be the expectation, so that's my concern.
Can I offer some thoughts?
Yeah.
The reason I think it's great to use ARPA money is ARPA's a one-time thing. There is no ARPA version 2. So I view this as a prototype. It's a project that if we proposed in our regular budget, these same questions would come up. And for the same reasons, we might be very hesitant to say we don't want to start something that has this long-term burden to the town in future years. As an ARPA project, it's let's try it and see if it works. And there's no commitment because it's not like we would remove it from next year's budget because it is never in next year's budget. Most of the equipment is under $1,000, right? I think the big bulk of the funds is for the shed and the infrastructure and standing the program up. So I don't think the ongoing cost would be a lot, but if they are and we decide we're not comfortable with it, I'm not pitching this as we have to do this for the next 10 years. I'm pitching it as I think it's a great program to try, and if it wasn't for ARPA, we probably wouldn't try it, so it fits in my thought process of let's use ARPA to try things we wouldn't otherwise try. That's where I'm coming from.
Before you make your motion,
I already did.
it's been moved and seconded. Okay, so maybe I'll ask a question, Mason or Bob. What if, again, trying to just thread the needle here, what if the allocation of ARPA funds was to establish the tool shed with $16,000 and FCAN owns it and runs it and supports it? So you get a one-time purchase of the equipment and then FCAN takes it and runs it from there.
FCAN hasn't been set up to be an operating entity,
Right,
and that's something that we would not take on lightly.
yeah.
We see this as something that would be used by the town residents, and it's a good time to start it. There was interest when we originally came with the rebate program. We said, let's not put our money into individual items for individual people, other than what you did with respect to heat pumps. This is something that is available for everyone in the town. We certainly would be able to continue with advice. We might be able to go out and get some money raised. We can't commit to that.
Sure.
But I don't see us operating something which we see as really as a town.
Yeah, and I wasn't asking you for an answer tonight, I was just.
No, but I
posing-
think that
posing that
that's
consideration.
where
But that's
we are.
great feedback.
That's where
Great
we are.
feedback. Thanks.
And I don't think we're in a position to own equipment.
Yeah. Can you get to the microphone, Mason? Or actually, Bob can hand you one. Yep, okay.
I might just add that for the program to operate for everybody's advantage, it ought to be available essentially 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, 6 days a week.
On property.
And
Yeah.
we don't have any physical facility and any staff to provide that kind of coverage. So we
Wild
anticipate it
idea
would be in the town.
doesn't fly.
Sorry?
It was a wild idea that I had that doesn't fly. That's okay. That's okay.
Let me just ask one other question, because I'm thinking about it another way, in the same way we've talked about supporting the wood bank, which is going to rely on donations from residents in order to help other residents. In the same way that we receive funds for the library, for the fire department, for other things, can we receive funds from private individuals to support this particular project if it was an ongoing piece?
We sure can, and I think that is a good way to look at it. That's the donation letter that goes out for the extras. I think that would be a good one. The only thing, I think I'm going to break in and probably speak too much at this moment, but I know that there's no such thing as a proxy vote, but I know that Councillor Benoit has very, very strong feelings about this, and she advocates strongly to me when we spoke, putting this together for the lending shed. And it was a lot about having people in our community have the ability to borrow a tool that they might only need once and not have to go expend the funds. And feeling like we have lots of people in the community that buying tools, period, is outside their budget.
Right. Daryl?
My last comment is, when people borrow stuff,
Very good.
thank you.
Yep. Yep. And we have an even number of counselors this evening, so I know we have a motion on the floor, which may not get resolved with a majority vote.
It may not, and we could always reconsider it. I would say it would be, for me, unfortunate if we fairly quickly distribute $60,000 to an organization that has more than that for a budget that's only $70,000. We've been working on that for many months. So I don't want to dismiss how easily we did that, but to me, it sends the wrong message that was fairly easy to get resolution on unanimously. And if we can't get $16,000 for a program we've been talking about for 2 years, that we generally, as a majority, support, that would be unfortunate. But I understand that if we don't have the votes tonight, we can reconsider next time, and when we have more information about the tax rebates then as well. Personally, I'm skeptical enough of the tax rebate program, given that ARPA was very specifically intended to say you cannot use this money for giving tax money back to citizens. I understand why MMA would hedge their bets, and if we don't have a definitive yes, in my mind, that is indicative that they're not going to come out and say, yes, you can do it, we'll stick our neck out on your behalf. So my hunch is that the additional information will also be cloudy. So I'm not optimistic about that option, and given that, I think it's a good use of the funds. So that's my last pitch.
So we have a motion on the floor. It's been seconded to move $16,000 for the tool shed from the ARPA funds. All those in favor?
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4. 4 to 2. Yeah, those opposed?
Nay.
4 to 2. Okay, so that takes us up to $107,000.
Yep. Which should be pretty much it. Pennies I'll probably round up to the trails.
Sounds safe.
Okay.
Okay, so that may be the last time we're talking about ARPA funds. All right, our last item before we go into executive session is actually a very joyful item. Item number 251-24, to consider a proclamation recognizing the Freeport Women's Club 100th anniversary. And if you will indulge me, I'd actually like to read the proclamation. Let the Freeport Town Council proclaim its deep appreciation for the Freeport Women's Club for its contributions to the greater Freeport community since its organization in 1924, and as part of its 100th anniversary celebration, to recognize this volunteer service organization's long history of generosity and good works that have supported community goals. And we have a resolution that we can sign. Any conversation about this item? Well, we have an action on the floor. Let it be proclaimed.
Second.
Okay, so moved and seconded. So I got to say that I didn't know we had a 100-year-old organization, the Freeport Women's Club, but I in the past couple of days, been reading about it, learning about it, and there's a lot of interesting elements of what this group has done. Dan and I had a little bit of conversation about particularly focusing on one of the community groups that we have, and at the risk of overlooking others that are also doing really good work. I think the particular proclamation here is because of its 100th anniversary, not for necessarily any sort of plus or minus activity that it's been doing. So for that kind of anniversary, I think that is worthy of a town proclamation. We have a 100-year-old community group. It's what we heard earlier in this meeting makes Freeport unique to have those groups here. And I know there's a number of others too, so we'd love to have the celebrate big milestone anniversaries of those groups as well. Any questions before we take the vote? Matt?
How'd the proclamation come to us?
So there was a request. Your town manager may have utilized their bylaws book to create whereases, and all they want, they have one coming from the state, a sentiment, and I borrowed heavily from that as well. And our very ill Public Works Director wanted to make sure that council knew that we planted a tree at the corner of Pine Street and Route 1 in recognition of the 100-year anniversary of the Women's Club.
All right. All those in favor of the proclamation?
Aye.
Any opposed? 6-0. Okay. That concludes the action on our abbreviated agenda this evening. Thank you all very much. We're going to move into executive session. Dan, could you please move us into executive session?
I can. To consider action relative to an executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA 4056E for consultation with the town attorney regarding pending litigation and the town council's rights and responsibility. I move that we enter executive session.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Okay, we'll go into executive session.
So I have a nice warm spot.